Hello, everybody, and good evening. I'm here live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this is our weekly live show. We talk every week about interesting mathematics problems that have something to do with maybe something in real life, but we also use this as a chance to answer any questions that anyone might have about all kinds of different things about how to learn math. I want to welcome everyone who came here tonight. This is, at this point, I think I've already lost count, but it might be the 14th or 15th time that we have done this show. And the reason is because I used to go around the country and the world giving talks about mathematics every weekend. Unfortunately, it was not possible to do that after a while because of COVID-19. And then, instead, I decided to try to reach everyone at home with these weekend live streams. Now, I see that some people are saying that they're new in here. How does this work? Well, here's what we do. We have 45 minutes. And in these 45 minutes, we first will talk about an interesting problem that I've been thinking about, and that will give you a chance to try thinking about the question, during which I'll make some comments for any parents or coaches who might be watching, because there's something interesting about the question that I can use to explain how you choose a good question. Then after that, I'll talk about how to do the question, although of course we'll get to see people give their answers first. And then I will go through a period where we can just answer any kinds of questions that people ask. This, to me, is one of the most fun parts, because it's a chance for us to actually interact and for you to tell me what's on your mind. The questions that we'll answer in the last bit of time, are questions that are not about specific math problems, because we already have weekly live streams, live streams during the weekdays where we talk about those. And at the end, I'll make some summing up comments about things that you should be able to expect this week. For example, if you have not heard yet, this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we have an official collaboration with Math Counts, where we'll be talking about the solutions of this year's chapter competition problems in detail. Okay, well, welcome to everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. So this is a question that I've been thinking about this week. I should tell you what the motivation is, but you'll find out as the question comes out. Here we go. Suppose that, on average, every person who gets COVID-19 normally infects 2.5 other people. Suppose there is a new app that tells people with perfect accuracy if they have been infected, so that they infect 0 other people. What percent of the population needs to install the new app in order for the pandemic to stop growing? I'm going to turn the volume off for a second. There we go. Right? So this is an interesting question. In fact, this question here has a lot of relevance to what's going on right now in the world. I'm putting the question here so that any students who want to think about it are very welcome to think. But I want to introduce that this question is a real one that I have had to answer. Now, any coaches and parents, I'm going to use this time to maybe talk about why I chose this question and how you choose a good question. You see, I always like to try to choose a question for the weekend that is a real question that people have asked me or that I'm thinking about in the world. It's always fun to be able to see that math is useful in a very fundamental way to answer questions we need to answer as people. And we also can see through the comments that people have given, we see very interesting answers, like 100%. At first, it might seem like you need everyone to install such an app for it to work. But you also see some other answers, like 40%, 60%. The reason this is an interesting problem is also because it's about probability. Probability is one of these subjects which a lot of people get confused by. And at first, it doesn't look like it's clear how you even start doing the problem. But that's why I intentionally gave you this hard question, because I don't expect you to know what to do. And that's what hints are for. You see, it's best to look at a question and not really know how to start, but to puzzle with it for a while. And after you puzzle with it for a while, it's also fine if you haven't solved it right away. especially if there's a hint prepared. Because through hints, people can go and start to see how their thought processes can get closer and closer to an answer. I love how there are lots of different answers appearing on this chat, because that shows this is an interesting, hard problem. But the hint number 1 says, if on average, each newly infected person infects less than 1 other people, then the pandemic stops growing. This is the fundamental principle of the mathematics behind epidemiology. You see, it's actually not important that when you're infected, you really infect 0 other people. As long as when you're infected, the number of people you infect after that is on average less than 1, then the pandemic will disappear. For you guys, it's this way. It will disappear. And the reason it'll disappear is because somehow the number of people who are infected is starting to decrease. It's decreasing by multiplying by 1% every time. Yes, I'm sorry, the hint disappeared, but the hint was basically saying you just need to make it so that on average, somebody affects less than 1 person. And that's when hint 2 comes. How do you reduce 2.5 to 1? Parents and coaches, if you're watching this, the idea here was this is actually a hard problem. This problem is at the root of mathematical epidemiology. But what I wanted to do is give this to the students that we might have watching here, students who might be studying algebra or geometry, and to see that, because of this hint, because of the first hint and the second hint, people have some pretty good ideas. Because the hint is just, how do you reduce this 2.5 to 1? And I saw some people already putting comments in that maybe you should do some kind of a division. Maybe that's the answer. Divide. So the heart of a good question to me is that maybe it has some nice story. It has a reason, a motivation that can get people interested, but also that it can teach you something. And today, the topic I decided to use is one that has relationships to probability or ratios or even exponential growth, because I wanted to cover those topics. And so I thought to myself, what kind of a problem that I've been thinking about in real life might have something to do with this? And that's the problem. So now let's talk about it. How do you do a question like this? I saw lots of different answers, and I think the most interesting thing is that at the beginning, we saw lots of answers of 100%. 100% seems like a lot, and in fact, that's what a lot of people assumed with these apps. You know, you may have heard that there are some apps that some people have made to go and try to decide whether, to try to tell people if they might be infected with COVID-19. And at first, everyone assumed that you need everyone to install this app. And if you need everyone to install this app, it's useless. It's just like how these days, I mean, not everyone follows all the rules, right? But the good news is epidemiology comes to the rescue. Because you actually only need to reduce the 2.5 to 1. Why? It's because you can think of things growing in terms of multiplying, right? Because the first hint is actually very important. If you had, like, say, 100 people infected at the beginning, actually, you could even start with 1, but let's start with 100. So let's suppose each newly infected person infects that 2.5 people. 2.5 others. Then what happens is, like, if at the first time, if at somehow we call it often like t equals 0, or we could call it now. If now what you have is that there are 100 people newly infected, then next what will happen is 2.5 times that, 250 newly infected. And what's next? I don't know. Next. Let's call it next. Next is 250 times the 2.5 times the 250, which I'm going to write this way, and that's equal to some huge number, 625 newly infected. And what you can see here is that it's just exploding more and more, and not just more, but more, right? But now if you go and flip and say, well, what happens if the number of people that are newly infected is less than 1 on average? Well, in that case, it goes the other direction, right? So the beautiful thing is if it goes the other way, if you instead suppose, but if, on average, a newly infected person infects let's say 0.9 other people, then what you can see is, like, let's suppose that right now you have n people infected newly. Then next after that, the number that are infected newly is n times 0.9. And then next after that, I'll just write one next, even though it's like next, is n times 0.9 squared. And the beautiful thing of what happens is that you keep doing n times 0.9 to huge numbers. And if you do that, eventually it goes to 0, right? This thing eventually goes to 0. And so that's the idea. That's how you actually get pandemics to disappear. So then the game becomes, what can you do? Oh, I see somebody was actually even putting 100, 99, 98, 90, and so on. Somebody says they don't get it. So there's a very fundamental idea here, which is that here I'm now putting a different model. My model is like, if the newly infected person, on average, infects only 0.9 other people. You might say you don't get it, because how do you infect 0.9 other people? You don't go around and say, I'll almost infect you, but not quite. No, that's not what that means. What that means is on average. So what it means is maybe there are 10 people who are newly infected, 9 of them infect one more, and the 10th doesn't infect one more. So that's how you would, on average, go and infect 0.9 other people. That's actually a very important point. It's that it's impossible for a person like me to infect exactly 0.9 other people. No. But on average, I could say all these newly infected people could on average infect 0.9 others. But this still works. And what you see is the number of infected people every single day is going to go down, 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 all the way to 0. That's what we want to happen to COVID-19. So now, the game becomes in the app. So now you assume there's like suppose there's some magical app. And if there's some new magical app, and that magical app makes it so that when you get infected, you don't infect any more people, then what happens? So the way you have to think about this is we effectively want to bring the 2.5 down to a 1, right? Because we now know that somehow if every person who is newly infected manages to transmit to one more person, that's pretty good. So that gives you an idea. Maybe you want to reduce by a ratio, right? So this suggests you want to try to have only 1 out of 2.5 of the newly infected people able to infect others. And not quite only, but like only just a little bit less than. Okay, so I say the word only, but really what I mean here is I want like just a bit less. And you'll see why. Because now let's try to draw a chart. Let's suppose that it's true that, it's still, this is still a situation. Every person who is infected would infect 2.5 other people on average. But let's pretend that when that infection happens, then only 1 over 2.5 of those people are able to keep infecting. And the others, well, because they have the app, they at least stop infecting other people. They might still get sick themselves, but they're not going to infect other people. How does this work? Let's draw a chart. This is actually very interesting. So now I need to make a chart. My chart has a few more layers. So I'm going to say, let's say we have now, okay? And I'm going to break apart newly infected. So I'm going to have somehow newly infected. But out of the newly infected, there's going to be some of them which are able to infect others. Okay? So let's suppose that right now we have 100 newly infected, but 100 times 1 over 2.5 of them are able to infect others. I want to make something clear about this chart. My number in green is some of these. So it's not like you have this many plus that many. I'm like, this is how many are newly infected, and by the way, this is how many of them can infect other people. So I'm not saying I've got this plus this many people. I really just have this many newly infected, and this is something describing some of them. Okay, now what happens next? Next thing that happens, it's only these people who are able to infect that try to infect. So these people multiply by 2.5, right? Because they're able to infect, and so they will infect 2.5 times. So I'm going to draw this arrow here and say I'll take that number, 100 times 1 over 2.5, and then times 2.5. Oh, look at that. It cancels. It's equal to 100. And if that's the case, well, out of this 100 newly infected people, 100 times 1 over 2.5 are able to infect others. So what you see is that actually it's the same thing. So if I happen to be able to make only 1 over 2.5 of the people able to infect more people, then it sort of reaches what we call a steady state. There's nothing growing and there's nothing shrinking. It's just the same number of people all the time. So that's why if I can make just less than this, then I'm in good shape. For example, let's pretend I didn't have 1. Let's pretend it was 0.9. Now if that was a 0.9, over here this would be a 0.9. And if that was a 0.9, now we go over here and we multiply. This is not a 1 anymore. This is a 0.9. And if that's the case, look what you get. You don't get 100 anymore. You actually get 100 times 0.9. And then when I go over to here, it's 100 times 0.9 times 1 over 2.5. I see some times 0.9 over 2.5. I see some people here now have the answer. Times 1 over 2.5. And if I just keep going, what's going to happen is that the number of newly infected people is going to start shrinking. It'll go times 0.9, times 0.9, times 0.9 until it's gone. And therefore, all I need is that only this much fraction of the newly infected people are able to infect others. In other words, I need 1 minus that fraction to have this app. Does that make sense? As long as 1 minus this has the app, those are the ones who are protected and don't infect anyone else. And then these are the ones who continue to infect other people. So that's why the answer is whatever percent corresponds to 1 minus 1 over 2.5. And you want like just a bit more than that percent of people to use the app. If I want to simplify this fraction, what is this? 1 minus 1 over 2.5. To me, 2.5 is 5 divided by 2. So I can write 2 over 5 here. And I have 3 divided by 5. And that is 60%. So you just need to have just over 60% of people to have this app, and then you'll be able to protect everyone in some sense, because you'll cause the disease to die out. Okay, so the answer was 60%. I hope that you found this somewhat interesting. It's something that at the beginning people would assume, oh, everyone needs to install the app. But actually, no, you don't. And you can actually just use this number 2.5 in order to figure it out. Do you know how I got this number 2.5? I searched Google for the R0, that's what it's called, the R0 of COVID-19. And there are lots of people who have estimated what that might be, and the estimates are coming in, and 2.5 is a reasonable number. It's not that it's the right answer, but it's a reasonable guess. And so in this world that we actually live in today, when we're looking at this news about all these different apps, you need about 60% of people to install the app, and then you're in good shape. And now you also understand how all of those people came up with that number. Because you may have seen on the news people talking about how we need this much percent in order for it to work. Great. And of course, actually, some of you know the reason I'm thinking about all of this is exactly because I've been working on one of these apps. In fact, I'm very happy to announce today that our app, Novid, is actually currently on the Google Play. It's a free app. It's called the Google Play Store, but it's a free app. So our app has actually made it into officially accepted by Google Play. It happens to be in Google Play's beta area. So if you're curious at all, if you just search Google for Novid, N-O-V-I-D, we are now actively trying to get 60% of people to try to install this app. And so that's an entirely different story, but that's how you go about using mathematics to hopefully try to help the world that we live in. Let me now move to the other part of this live stream. The other part of this live stream is where we just kind of answer random questions from other people. And I hope that the first part was somewhat interesting to you, where we got to think about a math problem, we got to think about probability, and you got to learn a little bit about something that I've been thinking about, which is something I've had to answer. What percent of people need to use the app? So now we go into Q&A. In the Q&A, I will specifically choose questions that are not just math questions. If you have just math questions, save them, please, for this week's weekly, the weekday live streams on Monday and Tuesday, we'll be answering all kinds of math questions. Let's see, what do we have here? Yes, Cody Tang, I'm just going to directly address this. Is Novid on the App Store yet? You mean the Apple one? Unfortunately, we aren't yet. In fact, Novid is currently still under review by Apple. But we've been lucky enough that because we had the support of people like the mayor of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University and medical institutions, we were able to convince Google that it would be a good thing for humans to have access to this. We're now talking to Apple. Oh, interesting. So Judy Andy asked, have you participated in mock trial? It's similar to the debate question from last week. I personally did not participate in a mock trial club, although we did do a mock trial in school. When I was in middle school, we did mock trial. I thought that was a lot of fun. I guess to me, I ended up just doing debate instead of mock trial, but I think that both are similar kinds of concepts, and definitely they're both useful. And they're both very mathematical. If you ever want to go and study for law school, it turns out that the exam to get into law school, called the LSAT, has a ton of logic questions in it. So if you like math, you might want to get into law and mock trial. Potato asks, Potat Poo asks, am I late? Well, not really. You came just in time for the Q&A. And so let's see what kind of Q&As do we have. Ooh, Annie Wu asks, how fast can you run? I'm not really sure anymore, because actually these days I don't really run. I just jump on a bicycle and go. So the answer is, when I ran, I don't know, maybe it was like 8 minutes for a mile, which is actually kind of slow, but it was fast enough to get me from place to place. It is also true, by the way, I run all the time inside my university. So I'm one of the only people in Carnegie Mellon University who runs all over the place, all through the hallways. But that's because I'm usually always late, as some of you who watch my live streams know. Let's see. More questions here. Wow. Howdy, friend has 6-minute miles. You're fast. I'm waiting here for someone to type in, I am speed. Okay. Ooh. So I see Debbie Math says, my dad said math is about remembering formulas. I thought it's about knowing it. Who's right? Okay. So you see, what your dad told you about memorizing formulas and remembering formulas is a good way to get problems done faster. I usually like to try to teach people where we don't just memorize the formula, but rather we kind of fight our way through it. You know, I'm just gonna tell you some truth. This problem that I just did, I hadn't worked it out before. I mean, on this live stream is exactly when I worked it out. I was like, I should probably figure out what the answer is because I'm teaching you guys right now. And that's kind of the way that I approach all of life. It's that somehow I prefer to fight my way through things as opposed to just remembering something and putting it down. And so if you can learn how to learn about math by thinking, then you can actually solve just about anything. So here's how I'd put it. If you want to get high scores, you can definitely do it by memorizing formulas. But if you want to get either really high scores or to be able to surmount problems that no one has ever seen before, it's better to learn how to think. And so I generally teach in a way that tries to help you think. Just like how you saw the problem we did today, where I first gave you a problem that you shouldn't be able to solve. Like, what kind of algebra or geometry student can solve that problem? None. However, by giving you 2 hints, we soon saw that the right answer was starting to appear all over this chat. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Nathaniel Potter asks, how can I maintain my skills when there are no competitions? Yes, competitions do help you to stay sharp. And in fact, they're a lot of fun because you can even see other people who are competing. But it's still possible to maintain your skills if you just actually use the time that you have to go and grab some problems and think about them. It's very healthy to, every day, spend some time thinking about some challenging problem. And so if you are like in the situation now where you might not have school running all day, this is actually an opportunity for you to go and pick out some questions and to think about them. And if you think about these questions, then you'll soon be able to figure out how to solve questions that you've never seen before. So I recommend that even though there are no competitions, you can still get way, way better. And maybe one reason I like to, in these live streams, talk about what I actually do is so you can also see, you know, I was one of those people who was always doing these competition problems when I was younger too. And if you do that when you're younger, in the end, someday in the future, you might find yourself fighting against a problem that nobody on earth knows how to solve. And you will maybe dare to do so. Let's see, what else can we do? I'm going to open this up too, because I have multiple screens here which are showing me all of the questions which are coming through. Hmm. Oh, okay. So Simeon Peters asks, do you do only math? No, 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 that's not true. I don't only do math. Actually, I do math to give me the direction for what I should do with everything else that I do. So I think that the math part of my upbringing and background is extremely important. It lets you find the right direction, and it lets you understand how to make a new strategy that other people might not have thought of. So that's a very central part of what I do. However, once you have that, you cannot actually just solve all of the world's problems just by doing a math problem. It's like we just calculated that, yes, we just need to get an app that 60% of people use. You can't stop there. If you stop there, it's not solved yet. You've got to make the app, right? So if you ask what I actually do, over the last few weeks, some of you who watch these live streams know, I was programming iPhone apps. I was programming Android apps. I was learning how to do those things. And right now, what am I doing? Right now, I'm no longer doing the programming because the programming is pretty good. I mean, in this past week, what I was doing is I was like talking to politicians or leaders, or the next thing I'm doing is, talking to people who are newspaper reporters or all of these other things. This is communication. And what I'm trying to say is that somehow you need to first come up with a strategy to solve the problem. You then have to execute the strategy, you have to do it, and that usually involves not just math. And then after you're done, you need to communicate the solution to everybody. Because if you're the only one who knows how to do it, it's still useless. The world has 7 to 8 billion people, and you need to find some way to reach all of them. So the answer is no, I don't only do math, but the math that I do is the most important part of everything. Somebody asked, have you created an unbeatable tic-tac-toe program by writing a ton of if statements? Were you at my live stream earlier? I think that's what I said. I did do that. That was a complete waste of time. Don't be like me. There's much better ways to write an unbeatable tic-tac-toe program by being smart and using symmetry of the board as opposed to just writing all the if statements. That's just stupid. Okay. Aha. Oh, Kevin Pan says it's not possible to consistently win. You're right. It is not possible to consistently win tic-tac-toe. But it is possible to write an unbeatable tic-tac-toe program. Because a tie still counts as undefeated. I think? Yeah. Okay. I see that Blaze has asked me, can you teach coding? You know, in another life, I probably would have really enjoyed teaching coding. But that's, you know what, maybe I'll take that a little bit back. So my personal opinion about coding is that the first thing you should learn is math. Like really serious math. Like math all the way up beyond the math counts problems and the AMC problems, all the way into the AIME problems. And at that point, if you have that kind of a math base, you can do a lot of coding. So I generally recommend first build that math to be awesome, and then move into the coding direction. Or maybe do both at the same time, but don't neglect really building up that math ability. And then when you go and learn coding, you don't necessarily have to go to any classes. You can actually learn a lot of coding just by trying to build your own thing and looking at examples on the internet. And you'll dare to do that if you happen to have that math background, because that math background is what's going to let you feel like, you know, maybe I could solve this problem. Yes, Derek Wang. Can I use math counts to prepare for AMC 8 and vice versa? Yes, of course. Actually, I think both of them are very, very good competitions. Both are sources of good problems. Although I might say, I think that math counts, when you go all the way to the national level questions, which are the hardest ones, those are maybe harder than the things you see on AMC 8. So AMC 8 won't be sufficient to go and get you ready. On the other hand, both of them kind of make your brain think about math. Oh, there's one advice I would give you. The AMC 8 problems are multiple choice. The advice I would give is, it's best if you just don't see the answers. If you can get someone to maybe cover up your multiple choices so you actually solve the problems, I think that's better. And if you're asking, then why in the world is AMC 8 multiple choice if it's better to not be multiple choice? The reason is because there are like 100,000 people who take the AMC 8. And so in order to grade all of those, the only way is to use a machine that reads the multiple choices. If the AMC 8 wanted to really give everyone the full challenge, and if it had enough people to grade 100,000 exams, then you'd write them down. Math counts, on the other hand, is something where everyone writes the answers in. And then you might ask, well, math counts also has like several tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 people playing. Then how are they doing that? Well, the way they do that is that while all of the students are doing the contest, there are all these people who are doing the grading, who are basically reading what the students wrote. And there's a lot of people involved in this. Main answer that I want to give you for your question, they're both useful for each other. And a nice tip, hide the answers when you're doing the AMC8. And that'll be a good challenge for you. What else do we have here? So there was a question about, is it okay if I use calculators? Some of my teachers either want us to use calculators or tell us not to use calculators. So my opinion is that the thinking is the most interesting part of the math problem. And so whenever I see a math problem, I first try to think, what are the steps I would do to figure out the answer? And then at the end, if you figure out the steps, the calculation part is the routine. So, if you use a calculator for that, that still gives you a lot of the value, as long as the question you're doing is hard enough. That's why you have to do hard enough questions. If you just do some easy questions, then it's just a calculation anyway. And so it doesn't matter. If you use a calculator, then sorry, not that it doesn't matter. If you use a calculator, it's just pointless. But if you think of a hard question, like what we were just doing today, if at the end you did 1 divided by 2.5 with a calculator and got 0.4, I'd say you still did the hard part, which is that you thought about it. Now I'll tell you the other part of my answer. I actually like challenges, and I know that most questions that are given in school, or especially on math contests, are designed so you don't need a calculator. And so usually those questions are very clever, and the numbers that are picked are really clever numbers. So I then take it as a challenge to myself to say, I wonder if I can figure it out. Not because I just want to get the right answer, but because I actually just love that challenge inside it. So the answer to your question is, the most important part of math is the thinking. And if that's what you've done and you use a calculator at the end, okay, whatever. But if you then decide, I don't want to use a calculator, and I'll take on the sport of thinking about the numbers to see if I can make this a simpler calculation, like what you see me do on these daily live streams, then I'd say that's even better, because then you've also changed the boring calculation part into something where you're actually thinking. Nice question. What else can I do here? I'm going to go and look at this other screen, which has another piece. Oh, okay. Oh, thanks for your compliment about being a talk show host. My goal here is actually just to be a math talk show host, but I'll welcome you to Saturday Night Math Live. Now, there's another question. Andrew Chow asked, can you explain how Novid works for a parent in the house? Novid's very simple. You see, this was all inspired because I actually happen to be a professional researcher in network theory. Network theory is like the study of networks, whatever those are. And the reason I say whatever those are is because you can study all kinds of networks. And so about a month and a half ago, I was thinking about network theory while also thinking about COVID-19 in the back of my head. And then it just hit me like a flash. COVID-19 is actually a network problem. It's a network problem. You don't need to go and shut down all of the schools and all of the cities, because actually what's going on is that it's only spreading from people who have it to people around them. And unfortunately, the reason why we shut everything down is for only one reason. It's because we have no idea who has it and who doesn't have it. And the reason why is because COVID-19 spreads before you know that you are sick. You see, that's actually the big fundamental difference between COVID-19 and normal diseases that humanity has beaten. And I'm saying this even though this is maybe it might seem off topic, but I'm going to say this is a very mathematical question. Actually, I made a whole video about this. If you're curious, go look on this same channel. And there's like maybe an hour long video, which is talking about the math behind COVID-19. And it just talks you through like all these different ways to use math to think about COVID-19. It even talks about the problem that we did today. But along the way, I was like, it's a network theory problem. We could get everyone back to work again if we can just find a way to collect this network, and if somebody finds out that they're sick, to quickly tell the people around them so that the people around them just stop spreading. And at that point, it's like back to normal diseases. Normal diseases only spread when you know you have it. And this way, at least the people who might be spreading also know they have it. That's the principle that I put there too, by the way. Tonight's problem was if you could find some way that the people who are spreading, some fraction of them stop spreading, bam, you're done. And so that's what Novid does. Novid is a free app. It runs on your smartphone. And when you install it, you don't tell it anything. It's anonymous. You don't tell it your name, your phone number. You don't tell it your phone number. You don't tell it your name. You don't tell it your GPS. You tell it nothing. And it generates a random number. And that random number is its ID. And as you're walking around in public, when you're around somebody else who has the same Novid app, then they both talk to each other by Bluetooth and ultrasound to go and tell each other that they're nearby, without telling each other like what the name of the person is, because we have no idea. They just say like, my ID number is 52, and the other says my ID number is 314, and fine, they just exchange these. But at some point in the future, if somebody tests positive, they can press a button, and then that button anonymously tells people who they have been around for at least half an hour. It tells those people, somebody just self-reported a positive test. During the time period that they were contagious, they spent at least half an hour with you. That's how the app works. And our principle was, if everyone on Earth had this kind of knowledge, then we might be able to see COVID-19 reduce its spreading rate. You see, if we think about us as humans, human beings are considerate. If we sneeze in our hands, we will not shake someone else's hand. That's like etiquette, right? We've learned how to behave. But the problem with COVID-19 is that when you're interacting with other people, even if you wanted to be careful, you have no idea that you're sick until it's too late, because you spread possibly for 2 days before you find out that you're sick. And with this app, you basically would know, I might be spreading now. And then if you start to act with the same level of caution that you would if you just sneezed on your hand, actually, we might just make the world a fundamentally safer place with no need for the government or any kinds of strange big organizations to take away our privacy. So that was the idea. Okay, let's keep going. Let's talk about some more math, but I hope you now see the whole point was use math to try to attack COVID-19. That's what I work on. Other questions? Ryan Liu, what do you think about the upcoming math counts? Do you mean the upcoming math counts that's in the middle of May? Yes, I think this is fantastic. Actually, that's why I wanted to also get involved. We volunteered to go and help host the preview, or the warm-up. Maybe we should call that the warm-up, which is where we're going over all of the chapter competition problems next week. Yeah, it's next week, because this week is Saturday. Next week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on this channel, we're going to be going over all of these chapter problems from this year to get everyone warmed up. And then what happens the week after is that there's going to be an open state round, which is just to let everyone go and try these problems. I recommend that you try these problems. The state problems are pretty hard, and challenge is good for you. So I think that, yes, it's great. Everyone should go and participate. And I think this will also maybe let you know that if there's ever any year that you don't qualify for the state round, it doesn't matter. You can still do the problems. The problems are really nice. So I strongly encourage that you participate, and I think that it's a great opportunity. And we're very proud to be able to help make a way for everyone in the US or the world who wants to get ready to warm up on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week. Actually, on that same topic, if you know anyone who might want to go and get warmed up for doing this fun big competition the week thereafter, please do tell other people. For example, if you have a math counts coach, if they want to join, this is going to be free. It's just on our YouTube daily live stream. Okay, more questions. So Howdy Friend asked, what is that you drink? And how do you get Novid? So this thing that I drink is just water. Although the problem is I can't really tip it and show you because of this thing called gravity. Somehow with gravity, even if I tip the cup, the level of the water is still the same. So you wouldn't really get to see. But yeah, it's just normal water. I've been pretty simple. I generally just drink water. Now, if you ask how can you get Novid, right now if you just search Google for Novid, N-O-V-I-D, you'll find it. Oh yes, if you have any trouble spelling Novid, just spell COVID with a no, and then you're good. But you search for this thing, you'll find our website, and you can see that there's a button already to download the Android version. And I'll tell you right now, the Android version is under testing, but we're going to submit a new one on Monday. And the iPhone version is actually still waiting approval. More questions. Ooh, Annie Wu says that she drinks Gatorade. Gatorade is pretty good if you're exercising, by the way. So it might be that since I'm doing math, I'm not really sweating. I guess that's one reason I enjoy doing math. In math, you don't really get that physically uncomfortable. Although at the same time, you also don't get the physical rush of having done something. But in any case, if you're not losing a lot of electrolytes, that's what it's called, through sweating, you don't really need Gatorade. On the other hand, if you are doing exercise, then you do need something to go and replace all of those electrolytes, those salts that may have gone out of your body. Okay. Yes. Oh, Alan Tang says Gatorade helps if you have a cold. That one might make sense too. Again, because you're trying to replenish these particular chemical elements that are inside your body. Tom Yan, you're really funny. You said you sweat a lot when you do math problems. come to think of it, when I did math competitions, I do remember that sometimes my finger would get sweaty. So, like if you're writing really fast and really trying to do the best with your time, you can actually sweat a lot. So this is why when I did math competitions, here's some tricks, right? It is not wise to wear some kind of a shirt that's like a big sweater that's all over you. It's better to wear something that if you get hot, you can just quickly take off and just put it on your chair. It's also not good to not wear a long sleeve thing, because sometimes when you go and do a contest, it's just like the room is too cold. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this before, but you go into some room to do a math contest and it's freezing. Or it's like an exam and it's just freezing. And if that's the case, you just can't concentrate either. So you always want to bring something that's warm enough that you could put it on you. And then if it turns out that you get too hot, you put it out, take it off and put it back, right? And if you have the problem that somehow your pencil or your pen gets sweaty, see if you can find like a pen that has a rubber grip, and that will work better. Okay. Owl Wise asked, what is the most important skill for math? To me, the most important skill is the courage to go and keep trying to think and fight on a really hard problem. You see, some people assume that there's some people who are just like good at math. It's not really true. The people who eventually can do the really hard things are the ones who just believe that they can by just trying hard enough, learning whatever skill they need to, finding someone to teach them. If they find out that they really need to learn this skill, they go find the best place to learn it, and then suddenly they're capable. You see, the thing about math is that everyone should be able to learn to a really, really high level. Maybe not everyone should be able to learn to become like a professor of mathematics, researching some very esoteric stuff that nobody understands. That's only a small number of people need to do that. But when it comes to all the rest of the math that you see in the math contests, you can actually learn that too. So the most important skill is to have the idea that you don't want to lose. The idea that you just want to solve something, you want to figure it out, and you'll do what it takes to figure it out. And if you've got that, you'll be able to go really far. What else can we do here? Oh, Skylar Shreya asks, will you go for 100% of people downloading Novid? Well, it would be great if 100% of people download Novid. Our goal actually, I would say our goal really is to move towards the 100%. And I'll tell you a little bit more. This is something I've been talking about recently with people who even advise governments. You see, there are some governments in the world which are saying like, let's just go and tell all of our citizens, you have no choice. You must install this app. There's a problem there. Even if they install that app, how do you know they left their phone on? What I'm trying to say is that there's two ways to achieve something. And this comment I'm saying is actually relevant to parents or coaches who are thinking about how to teach too. There are two ways to achieve something. One is to just like make a rule and say, this is how it has to be. Everyone has to install the app. But if fundamentally the app is something that nobody wants to use, oftentimes if it's made without any regard for the person and it's just somehow to maybe control, then maybe people won't really use it. Maybe they'll kind of find all kinds of ways to get around it. That's not what we did. So the idea of Novid was, I was wondering if it's possible to actually legitimately make an app that everyone legitimately would find useful, that they might actually want to install themselves, and that didn't take any private information, so it wouldn't cost them anything. You see, the point is, if you go and design from the other direction, then you actually have some potential of going up, because everyone wants to. Now let me take it to the learning math analogy. That's also why the problem that I gave you first, for today, it wasn't just like any old calculation problem. I tried to couch the whole thing around something that you might care about. And then hopefully it would make you curious, because you've been seeing on the news, people are talking about this percent of people that need to use an app. So if you can align somehow the interests of what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to get someone else to achieve, together with that person's own interests, maybe you could run for 100%. And part of my goal of running these live streams that I'm doing here about math is also similar. My goal here, whether you like it or not, is to try to show everyone that math is actually pretty interesting. Math is pretty powerful, pretty interesting. I like it, and I hope that, maybe other people will too. Let's see. Wow, Paperboy asked, how many people do you think Novid will save? That's a really deep question. It all depends on whether or not we can actually get allowed to be used by everyone. If it could be allowed to be used by everyone, we're probably talking in the millions. That's just because I should actually say one of the goals of NOVID is not only to help the United States. There are other countries all over the world which do not have as developed medical systems as the United States. And they might not even have ways to test all of the people to see if they have the virus. And so one of the goals of NOVID is actually to roll all the way across and to use the smartphone to actually provide ways to tell people whether they might be sick or not, and hopefully save quite a few lives. That's what motivates me. Let's see, what else can we do? More questions. I want to see if I can get other kinds of questions. Ooh, Andrew Chow. What advice can you give to elementary schoolers to be able to compete in math one day? Well, you're in the right place. If you're here and hanging out with all of these crazy people, I say crazy in a good way, by the way. Crazy can mean not just like weird. Crazy means like crazy good, right? If you can hang out with all these people and discuss this kind of math, then you're probably developing an understanding of math that is going across all different areas at once. You see, you're asking how can an elementary schooler get good at math competitions? My answer to you is actually learning all these different areas of math all at the same time is not bad. If you think about what some people do, or most people only learn math like one area at a time. Either they go to school and they kind of do like this class, and then they do this class, and then do this class, or they use books, and they'll go and read this book, and then they read that book, and then they read that book. But math is actually very interconnected. And what you've seen through all of these live streams is that we can pull together all these different ideas. So since you're young, if you happen to be not yet in middle school, I think the best thing for you is to go and work on problems that kind of go across the whole spectrum, or hang out with other people who are asking all these kinds of crazy questions that take us on a tour across math. Wow. Well, unfortunately, we've actually already run into our time. Our weekend live streams only go until 8:45. And in fact, today there's another reason. It's because I have a phone call with the Philippines, which starts in 15 minutes. So I'm just going to say, I hope that you had an interesting opportunity to get a glimpse into how math can help you to solve some real problem inside the world today. I also hope that these questions and answers that we just went through were somewhat in your interest. If you liked this, please tell more people about it for multiple reasons. One is that my goal is not only to talk to students, but also to have the chance to talk to parents and to coaches, because the kinds of thinking that are here are really what can help us to build better students. And if you happen to be a student, please tell more people, because then we can have more people in this fun chat room discussing all kinds of funny things. And don't forget, this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m., we have something that's quite special. And for this, it would be probably a good idea to tell your Math Counts coach, tell your Math Counts team, and maybe we can have a huge number of people who are all trying to think about some questions together. There's no live stream tomorrow because tomorrow is Sunday. But I'll see you all on Monday, and there we'll have another Ask Math Anything. Until then, stay safe, everybody, and good night.